Welcome to the Berry Tramel Show, and this is going to be a unique show for me. I've got somebody on with a very similar name. I get a lot of emails, get a lot of feedback from readers, but very few have the insight of my guest. It's my twin brother, Terry. We've been partners for 62 years, and the college football playoff has invigorated me to invite him on because he has a unique perspective, and we will talk with my twin brother Terry in just a few minutes. But first, our show today is sponsored by Keep OKC Big League. We've got the arena vote coming up Tuesday in Oklahoma City. A vote yes will help keep the Thunder in town. And so now we welcome in my twin brother Terry. Homa, we call you Homa because your nephew 40-something years ago, you married a girl from Virginia. He didn't know your name. All he cared about was that you were from Oklahoma. He called you Uncle Homa. I've called you Homa ever since. So Homa, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Barry. Glad that you invited me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's get right to it. You have a lot of things going on in your life, but you had the time to pen a letter to the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee, Boo Corrigan, upbraiding him for his selection, or for the committee's selection over of Alabama over Florida State. And so I wanted to bring you on and talk about the questions you asked of Boo Corrigan. You're not going to get a response. Most of those questions actually don't even have a response. And frankly, we don't even agree on this issue. I supported taking Alabama. But what we're going to do is something we did, 50 years ago. Our Saturday mornings, we'd get up, we'd make our college football predictions, and then we'd settle in. And if there was a game to go to, we'd go. Usually Norman, once up to Stillwater for the 73 OSU-Nebraska game. If there was not a game to go to, we'd sit and watch college football. And so we've been college football aficionados well before we entered the professional ranks. Now, I entered journalism at the age of 17 professionally. I was a late bloomer in our family. You preached your first sermon at age 14. I think it was your first revival at 16 as an evangelist, I think. Is that right? I think at 16. Now you have a Ph.D. in religion. Religious studies. You've been a professor. You're director of world missions now for the International Pentecostal Holiness Church. You've memorized the book of Revelations. Not making that up, people. Not making it up. He can recite the book of Revelations from memory. And yet, your college football Saturdays are reserved for college football. So that's one of the things I love about you. So let's talk a little bit about Florida State, Alabama. Why were you so upset when you saw Alabama's name on that list?
Barry, you framed it well. I'm a lifelong college football fan. I don't go to the games. You took me to the press box once back in the 80s. I've been to one game. The last game I went to in Norman was in 2001. But I don't hunt. I don't fish. I don't smoke or drink or cuss. I'm faithful to my wife, my church, and my Lord, but I've got one vice, and that is 14 Saturdays a year. Every fall, I block off from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and I watch college football. And like a lot of people, I think I'm really not happy with just about everything that's happening. You'll be able to tell I'm a Scrooge. I'm a purist. I don't like the NIL. I don't like the portal. I do not like coaches' salaries with huge buyouts. I don't like the cheating. I don't like bowl games between mediocre teams in front of empty stadiums. I do not like conference realignment that stretches from coast to coast and destroys rivalries. I don't like the overtime rule. I don't like those 6 dreaded words that we keep hearing way too much. The previous play is under review. Just about everything I don't like, except one thing, and that's the games themselves. I still am drawn in by the games. And the regular season especially, but I'm willing to, watch the playoff. And I really thought Boo Corrigan and his committee had an easy assignment. Just, the 4 teams look clear to me. You have 5 conference champions, all had an excellent season. 3 were undefeated, 2 had 1 loss. It seemed logical to me. The 3 undefeateds move on. The other 2 you compare, but they settled it on the field. Texas beat Alabama. I thought it was a done deal. And then I found out that Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan had named their son correctly, Boo, with the decision that was made that somehow left Florida State out.
Well, first of all, here's my counter to Florida State. The one problem I've had with the committee over the years is their cookie cutter rankings. They always go by number of losses. And frankly, I've been hearing this from you for literally 50 years. When we would talk about the old AP poll, you would always ask a question: who did you lose to? That's how you liked to rank teams. So you've been sort of fixated on this losses thing, and the committee's been the same all these years. If you go through any set of rankings they have, it's 0, 0, 0 in losses, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2. That's just how they rank people. I got a little charmed seeing that they ranked them this time by something besides defeats. It looks to me like Alabama didn't have just a better schedule, a tougher schedule than Florida State, but a significantly better schedule. And I thought that was the key to, all things being equal. Sure, Florida State's in, but I don't think they were equal. I thought Alabama played 2 elite teams in Georgia and Texas. Florida State played none. To me, that was what pushed them ahead. But your letter to Boo Corrigan was fantastic. If you asked all kinds of questions, some were silly, but some were insightful. And let's just get right to them. Here's number 1. If Deion Sanders was the coach at Florida State and had the exact same results as this year's team, would they have still been left out? What say you?
We know the answer to that one. Obviously, they would not be left out. The whole premise of the argument against Florida State being excluded is that this has all been arranged for television. And if they could have got Deion Sanders in the Final Four, the debate would have had to have been between there wouldn't have been a debate with the Deion Sanders. The purpose of that question is to show the hypocrisy that there's more determining the results than what was asked.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think they might have jumped for the Deion thing. They focus on personality to some degree, I think, at times. And Deion he's a lightning bolt this year. If he'd have gone 12-0 at Colorado, he'd been in. So you're probably right. Number 2, what if Alabama would have beaten Georgia 13-10, but quarterback Jalen Milroe would have torn his ACL in the second half? Would the committee still have taken Alabama? What say you?
Well, I think this is a very valid question because obviously the Alabama team that would go into the playoff is going to be different than the team that they would have had before with Milroe as the quarterback. I think this one would have required the committee to make a decision, but not between Alabama and Florida State. It would have had to have been between Alabama and Georgia. You couldn't let Alabama go without Milroe. If you can do that, then Florida State is in. But you also have to have a team from the Southeast. That's a given from the Southeastern Conference. So they would have had to have made one of those decisions. And the hypocrisy that we'll do this to Florida State, but not to if it happened to Alabama, I think it's obvious.
Yeah, the problem with this whole process is projecting with injuries, acting like they know what Florida State would do going forward without Jordan Travis. That's where they've gone off sideways on this whole thing.
And the
And
irony, Barry, is every Tuesday night, Boo Corrigan would come out and say, we don't project, we don't project, we don't project. And then finally, when it gets to the biggest vote of all, the only one that matters, they did
they
nothing
project.
except project.
They project. No, you're right. You're right. I can't. You're exactly right. I tend to think. I don't know what they would have done, but it certainly would have called into question their ability to make a decision based solely on Jordan Travis, which appears to be what they did. So that's not good. That's not good. All right, number 3. And this is, to me, this is interesting. You ask, was there anybody speaking up for Florida State in the voting room, or was it 13-0, 13 votes to 0, all for Alabama? And you point out the irony of 13-0 is actually Florida State's record. This speaks to the star chamber nature of the committee room. You're looking for a little. You want some more. You want to poll the jury, in other words.
Barry, I was looking for Henry Fonda. It's 12 Angry Men. We needed one man to step up and say, I think there's reasonable doubt here. Did we have that? Or were they all puppets? Was it all, you used the phrase cookie cutter earlier. Was it all yes men? Was there ever a 10-3 or 9-4 vote? Did anybody sway anybody, or was, I'm convinced, and you can see it probably by the next question that you were going to ask me. I'm convinced really the committee members didn't vote. It had to be computers. If you look in that room, and you've been in that room for those rehearsals, I know. If you look in that room, there's always all these 12 men around these computers. Well, I'm convinced it was the computers that did the voting, because if men would have done it, there would have been at least one that would have had a spine or a backbone or a heart. And since they didn't, it had to be the computers.
Well, I actually think it'd be cool if they were able to level with us and say the vote was 8-5, or the vote was 10-3, or the vote was 7 to whatever it is. I think that would help. I think you can acknowledge they were given an impossible task. They were given 4 spots on the lifeboat, and there's 5 people left on the Titanic. Somebody was going to get left out, and frankly, all were deserving. I mean, Alabama going 12-1, beating Georgia in Atlanta for the SEC championship game. You can't say that Alabama's not deserving, but on the same thing goes for Florida State and their resume. So it was a Sophie's choice situation. So I don't know if this would help, but I do think if Boo Corrigan or any other committee chairman would come out and say, the vote was actually 8-5, and we talked about it, and we voted again, and it was still 8-5. I do think people would feel a little bit better. So,
well, considering that across the national landscape, there is still outrage. There's literal outrage, and it's not just coming from Florida State fans or anti-Alabama fans. It's people like myself that are neither one. I love the state of Alabama. I love the people in it. I have spoken there in many settings. Alabama and Georgia both have a Bojangles. They're high up on my list as far as the value of states. But I cannot, for the life of me, grasp this idea that this was really that hard of a decision. You've got 3 undefeated teams. I tell you, when it would have been hard if you had 5 undefeated teams and 4 spots.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be left out. Whoever's left out, they would just have to take their lumps without an argument. But if you play every game and win them all, and you see somebody that lost, and I know you already stated your case, and I'd read it before about Alabama had the better schedule. I think you're right on that. You would say it was the more difficult schedule on paper, okay? But I don't think it was the harder schedule. Here's what I mean by that. You got 2 choices. Let's say any hypothetical coach in the country that wants to win the national championship. If they gave you 2 choices, you could either play Alabama's schedule or Florida State's schedule. Which one do you want to play? every coach in America would raise their hand for Florida State, right? They'd say, I'd rather play Florida State's schedule than Alabama's any day. But they say, if you'll play Alabama's schedule, we'll give you a mulligan. You don't have to win them all. You can lose a game and still go. But if you take Florida State's schedule, there's no margin of error. You have to win them all. I think what Florida State did in going 13-0 was harder than what Alabama did in going 12-1.
Well, that's where we disagree, because I think going 1-1 against Georgia and Texas is more impressive than going 0-0 against Georgia and Texas type teams. But let's move on. We're going to skip a couple of questions that we've already sort of covered. Now, I thought this was fascinating. With all this talk about Jordan Travis being injured, playing without him, you say, since the committee has embraced the prediction business, which they sort of have, after seeing all the games, how many points do you really think Michigan would score against that Florida State defense? And I think that's a legitimate point. I think people have overlooked how good Florida State's defense is and how much of an elite unit that is. This is not a Florida State team that wins games 35-31 on a regular basis. This is a team that plays big-time defense.
If Florida State would have won the game playing against Louisville's third-team quarterback, then I could understand why that would be suspect. But they won the game playing with their own third-string quarterback. And did anybody watch the Michigan-Iowa game? Was everybody just watching Florida State-Louisville? I was doing what I do every Saturday. I flip back and forth. Do you know what the score was at halftime of Michigan?
Was it 10-0?
Iowa, it was 10-0. Michigan had an 87-yard punt return to the 1-yard line, and they punched it in. You take that play away, you've got a 3-0 game at halftime. Where's the outcry about where the offense is? How I don't understand it. I can't wrap my mind around the double standard.
No,
I've seen Michigan all year long. I really think that, there's an excellent chance Alabama's going to beat them straight up. Michigan's a little vanilla on offense. They've got a strong defense, but they haven't really played too many top teams. So anyway, that's something I wish the committee would have looked at.
All right, you also asked Boo Corrigan this. If the SEC already had a berth sewed up before the season, just tell us so that everyone else would know they were fighting for 3 spots instead of 4. What you're really asking there is, how much does the committee look at previous season results? And the truth is, they say they don't, but the truth is, we know they do. I mean, I supported Alabama being in, but I also said going without an SEC representative in this college football playoff would have, you talk about outrage right now from the Florida State faction, we literally would have a college football revolution going on right now if no SEC team had made the Final Four.
Well, I think that would be a valid question for Boo and his committee. Just be upfront with us. If you knew going in the SEC was going to get one, just tell Florida State and Washington and Texas and everybody else is playing. There's not 4 seats available. There's only 3. You're playing for 3 spots. And I think that's something that, would leave them silent really without an answer. I know Kirk Herbstreit has sounded the alarm, and almost all the talking heads from ESPN, why Alabama deserved it. And one reason, Herbstreit, he's tired of calling the mismatches, in some of those semifinal games and the such like. But I think your point is actually, right on target when you said they have to look back at previous years. It'd be human it wouldn't be human if you didn't do that. But and I know they look back because it's hard to say Alabama beat Georgia without saying Alabama beat Georgia, who had won 29 games in a row. But time out. You're not supposed to factor that in, the win streak of 29 games.
No.
If you don't think there is some kind of bias, real or imagined, it certainly is through the television emphasis with the SEC. Let me ask you, Barry, do you think there'd be very many people surprised if the committee just goes ahead and announces next year for the 12 game? I know it's not in the protocol now, but they could easily make a change. The 4 teams that get buys next year will be Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and the winner of OU Texas. Would that surprise you if they did that?
Yes, that would surprise me if that happened. Yes, that would surprise me. That would surprise me. Here's the thing.
I've been known to use hyperbole before. I'll only pull it out if needed. But there is a measure of truth even in hyperbolic statements.
Yeah, here's the truth. It's a bad system, and we've avoided cataclysmic decisions like this. We didn't avoid it this year, and it's a mess. You raised some other good points. We're going to move on quick. Liberty SMU shows that they switched their parameters quite a bit. SMU clearly has the tougher schedule. Liberty won unbeaten. Liberty got the major bowl berth, unlike the other situation. You make the case that the ACC was stronger than the SEC in some ways this year, and truthfully, the SEC's non-conference this year was not very good at all. I guess the best SEC victories were Kentucky over Louisville, Mississippi State over Kansas, and Mississippi State over Arizona, and Missouri over Kansas State. So there's your 3 big SEC victories. None of those teams are relevant really to this discussion.
Well, I just said the ACC, at least in one metric, had a better year than the SEC, and that was in head-to-head matchups. And the ACC won 6 of those. But I know, and again, you can't use head-to-head. You can't use any games that actually were played on the field to support your argument in this day and time of make-believe and all that's happening.
All right. Well, let's move aside for a minute and a couple of questions I wanted to ask you of a more personal nature.
From the book of Revelation, or
no, probably not go to Revelation. We got to keep our audience. I don't know that our audience is. I can't grasp Revelations. I don't know anybody else would besides you. But I've talked a little bit, written about it over the years, just about some of our upbringing, where I come from. But from your perspective, of course, I've told everybody, I won the birth lottery. We had a great mom and dad. Unbelievable upbringing. We weren't rich, but man, we had a great home and we were able to thrive. You ever look back and thought about what was it about the 70s, growing up on East Boyd Street in Norman in the 1970s that allowed us to turn out the way we did?
Well, you said it well. It was nothing that within us or our brother. We were just blessed with an incredible mom and dad and a home that was balanced, not too strict, not too loose, but balanced and filled with love. And it was a home where there was room for, of course, faith and family and friends, but also football. I look back on it. My mother, we weren't fair to her. She was outnumbered, 4-1, and we could just, and she didn't care for it at all, but she would certainly go the extra mile on her end. It was just a wonderful environment to be raised in and to live in, and to still try to extend in our families today.
When you think about autumn Saturdays in the 1970s on East Boyd Street, what are some of the memories you think of? I'll give you one. 1970, we were 9. Bedlam was in Norman, and we did not go to the game. I think Dad got season tickets to OU the next year in 71. So we didn't go to the game in 1970, and the game was not on television. And so we listened on the radio, whatever game was on TV. I don't know, we were watching, but we also listened to Bob Berry would have been calling for the Sooners in 1970. He had not yet left to go to OSU. And that was when the wishbone was about, 6 weeks old, maybe 7 weeks old. And that's the game where the wishbone exploded. And the Sooners won 66-6. And after 2 or 3 touchdowns, we started running outside. As soon as we heard that OU scored a touchdown, we ran outside to see if we could hear the roughneck shotgun go off when they'd blow those dang things after a touchdown. That's one of my memories. What are some of yours?
And by the way, on that game, they blew it a lot.
Yeah,
when they scored
66-6,
60-something points. Well, Dad at the time, was managing a motel and a restaurant. And so he would on game days, he would bring us something from the restaurant, whether it was a steer burger or a steak sandwich or something. And I loved those. And then when we had the 5 season tickets and we were in that upper deck and the next to the highest row, I have no idea how I did it then, because I'm full-fledged vertigo,
We got to tell people, our dad's tickets were in the upper deck on the far north end, section 109, and we were 3 rows from the top, I think. Row 42 and row 44 was the top. And we had the final 5 seats up against the wall, and you and me were often the ones against the wall. And at the age of 10, 12, 13, I'd stand against the wall and look over. It didn't bother me. I can't stand on a second floor balcony now. I mean, you put me on a step ladder and my knees start wobbling. And yet there I was, literally 4 miles in the air, and it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me a bit.
Yep. Same. One of the memories that I have, we would sometimes, Dad, we'd go and park a car close to the stadium, and then Mom would drop us off later, where we could make a getaway. But walking to or from the games, a lot of times Dad would have a radio with the headset, and a lot of times he'd let me wear it. I was always more interested in the scores of other games. You talked about us predicting them. And so I grew up, I still love OU and the Sooners, and a lot of my family attended there and all. But I've always seen myself more as a national fan, even to this day, like why something like this, it doesn't even involve OU, why it matters to me. But just the fact of being able to hear those other scores. And that's why there's somebody like me. I have no desire to go to a game today, especially if there was other games going on. Well, you can stay at home and monitor 8 or 10 at a time. Barry, I even remember before Al Gore invented the internet, you were up in the press box several times. You would call me at home to get updates on scores.
All the time. In the 80s, I would call you all the time, saying, "Hey, give me an update." I'd call you in the 90s.
Sometimes I was giving you the play-by-play as a team was lining up for a field goal. You said, tell me what's happening while you're doing it. And so people were used to talk about how great of a job you had, going to all these things. And I said, he contacts me to find out what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's true. That is true. Yeah, and we would walk up. Our parking space was the corner of Boyd and Classen, right on that intersection. Dad found a way to sort of park illegally, I think, and they never bothered him. And so we'd end up walking along Brook Street to the game. So, one of the things I remember about football in the 70s was everybody smoking. The stadium's full of smoke, and it didn't bother anybody.
That was just part of the smell, and you can still, if you smell it today, you almost can go back to that kind of scene.
That's right. Our Uncle Don says that when they started limiting, trying to persuade people to quit smoking, the tobacco companies just made the tobacco a lot more addictive, and that's why the smell today is a lot worse than it was back then. I have no idea if he's got a case there. He's not a scientist. I don't think he's a high school graduate, but the smoke never bothered us in 1974.
No.
I will say that. All right, Homa, has the scandal of Florida State and Alabama ruined your postseason? Will you watch the 3 games? The playoff games?
I will probably watch them. I'm not going to threaten to get even with college football and turn off the TV. They don't even know I'm alive, and they certainly don't care. But I'll definitely be watching, but I'll be watching knowing whoever wins, I think you got to give them an asterisk. There's going to be an asterisk. It's no fault if Alabama wins, give them an asterisk, and it's okay. Saban's won 3 or 4 that already have an asterisk. Are you kidding me? He beat
Saban's won 3 or 4 with an asterisk?
At least 3 come to my mind right now.
11? Are you counting 11? Shouldn't have been there in 11? Is that what you're saying?
2011? By the way, these undefeated seasons that Florida State just pulled off, they're kind of hard to do.
They are hard to do.
Saban's only done it twice.
Yeah.
He did it in 2011, and then he did it in the COVID year that you throw away. He played less, you played less games. Okay? But Barry Switzer had 2 unbeaten seasons, and one of those had a tie, and the other one didn't play in a bowl game.
Yep, that's true.
Joe Paterno won 3 or 4. He went unbeaten 3 or 4 times and didn't even get to play, for national honors. I'm just telling you, it's hard to do. But LSU and Alabama, 9-6 in overtime. You think Corrigan's committee would like to have watched that thing? 9-6 in overtime? We're going to leave Florida State out because they got a 3rd stringer and they only scored 16 points? That was one asterisk. How about when and of course Alabama, they got to go and do a rematch. People saying the whole thing's to get the 4 best teams. Any formula is really to determine who the best team is. And we already knew that year it couldn't be Alabama. They played on the field, right? So how about the year when Saban's year that he went unbeaten and he got to play Texas? And on their very first series, what happened to Colt McCoy?
Yeah, it wasn't the first series, but it was early in the game.
Early in the game. He was
early
injured,
in the game.
And I think you got to give him an asterisk there. I mean, we're not even letting Florida State play because their quarterback got hurt. Okay. Yeah. And then I think he gets an asterisk. Well, I could tell you about the one at LSU. That's when he got to beat OU. USC, obviously, from the vantage point of some of us, had the best team. OU lost 35-7.
Well,
by 4 touchdowns.
USC it's an asterisk. Listen,
39-36 in triple overtime.
It's an asterisk sport. You're right. It's a mythical champion. It's a mythical national champion sport.
It is mythical.
We've come a long way. It's less mythical than ever. I'd say it's not mythical anymore. This was an unfortunate year. Moving forward, we're not going to have it. But moving forward, we will have to. We'll have fewer, I think, of these. But you know what, Homa? I'll have you back on, and we'll talk about it some more. This has been fun. We're out of time. We got to go. But it's been fun ripping Boo Corrigan. It's been fun deciphering college football, and it's been fun talking about old times on Boyd Street.